Hi, everyone. Welcome to our first Partner for Impact event, the Eviction and Homelessness Crisis. How can we respond? Partner for Impact is a brand new quarterly event series that will highlight different issues within the context of building successful corporate and nonprofit partnerships. I'm Nancy Youssef, Chief Business Development Officer at Souls for Souls and Technically Challenged. For those of you who might not be familiar with us, Souls for Souls is a nonprofit that turns shoes and clothing into opportunity by keeping those products from going to waste and putting them to good use. We're transforming lives by providing relief, creating jobs, and empowering people who are experiencing poverty. The impetus for today's event converges several issues, social issues, including race in America, the homelessness epidemic in the US and its intercross with COVID, and how children uniquely experience homelessness, just to name a few. In addition to diving into these intersections with industry experts and leaders, we'll also spend time today focusing on how nonprofits and brands can pivot during times of crisis to meet the needs of their customers and their constituents. In the next hour, we're going to hear from Khadijah Williams, a nationally recognized advocate for homeless youth and a survivor herself. From there, we'll pivot to a panel moderated by feminist activist, writer, and speaker, Jamia Wilson, and featuring voices from organizations like the ACLU, Foot Locker, Souls for Souls, and the St. Louis Public School District. If you have any questions for our speakers today, please feel free to include them in the Q&A box on your screen somewhere. With that, I'm so proud to introduce our keynote speaker, Khadijah Williams. After nearly 20 years of homelessness, including in Los Angeles's infamous Skid Row, Khadijah was accepted into Harvard University, where she graduated in 2013 with a Bachelor's of Arts in Sociology. Today, Khadijah is a member of the Board of Directors at the National Homelessness Law Center and is also an education policy professional. She currently serves as the Senior Education Organizer at Rocket Ship Public Schools, where she leads the DC branch's work in parent leadership, development, organizing, and mobilizing. Khadijah, it is my pleasure and my honor to turn it over to you.
Thank you so much for such a lovely entry, Nancy. My name is Khadijah Williams, and I'm a survivor. After experiencing nearly 20 years of homelessness, I was accepted to and later graduated from Harvard. I'm not a bootstrap story. Fox News once wanted to interview me because I made something of myself. I declined. It was an honor to be interviewed by Oprah, but unfortunately, she referred to my success story as a triumph of belief. My decade of work with local and national organizations, schools, decision makers, and alongside and in support of other homeless children, in addition to my own lived experience, has made it clear to me that homeless children need us to show through our actions that we believe in them in order for them to be able to believe in themselves and break that cycle of poverty. My very first memory of not being homeless is when I was 1 year old, waddling through Brooklyn morning snow. It's not even a memory I'd say was necessarily happy, but simply a memory that I can recall. It is a memory that is not shielded from my mind in an effort to protect me from the traumatizing impacts of homelessness. My very first memory as a homeless person could just as well be my third or fourth or fifth, because they all blend together in my mind. Some of the most clear memories I have, though, involve two things: what I was wearing, or rather how I felt about what I was wearing, and the process of moving and of movement. I used to run out of the stroller when I was 4 so fast that friendly strangers caught me while I was laughing hysterically. I thought it was hilarious. And while they carried me to my mom, it was a lot of fun. I remember my little sister and I cherishing every single outfit that my mom bought us because it represented countless hours of begging since her untreated paranoid schizophrenia rendered her unable to hold down a job. I remember not wanting to go to school because the shoes that were donated to me were clearly not new, and frankly, they were ugly. And I didn't want to get beat up again because the shame of not having cute shoes made me a target for the cruelty of other suffering children. I remember the endless amount of walking we had to do to get to bus stations, middle of nowhere, roach-filled motels, and abandoned homes. The quick middle of the night moves from squalid apartments because we could not pay the rent. How my mom, under the cover of dawn, would pack up trash bags of belongings to escape the dangers for her daughter's safety's sake, both real and imagined. I remember the pain in my knees, toes, and soles that I felt every single time I ran track in high school, pain that I still felt to this day. And I remember how hard it was to make shoes last because movement, like education, was my salvation. As a child, I saw things that no child should see and experienced things that no child should experience and felt emotional turmoil that no child should feel. Yet, or maybe because I was a child, I somehow understood that how I was seen as a homeless child was very much connected to the value that society places on certain individuals over others. I use this understanding to assimilate into the picture of the perfect Black homeless child. I knew I had to look, act, be that child worthy of help. How many of you would hire someone who came to an interview with torn shoes? Would feel good about a date where the person put in no effort into their appearance? How many of you have passed by a homeless person on the street who looks like he wore the same pairs of pants for a very long time and thought, I'd hire him in a heartbeat because he looks like an executive? Now, imagine that you are a homeless child seeing yourself through the eyes of others. Imagine that your homelessness comes with a debilitating shame that comes from people hurrying from you as you sit with your mom and your little sister on the sidewalk or the bus station, or that comes from the pity you see in the eyes of your teachers when they think you aren't looking, or that comes from bullying from both children and adults for living in that shelter across the street. Imagine that when you have no control over where you live, when you move, and how you're perceived, you feel you can at least choose what you want to wear, but then you realize that those choices are limited by what people choose to give. How would you feel if you were in my shoes, which cause blisters and arthritic toes, and you had nothing else to wear to soothe your feet? Or in my jeans grabbed from a donation pile that were stained and torn? We're all here because we know that a pair of shoes isn't simply a pair of shoes. Not to a child that has none. We know that wearing proper shoes for a variety of health reasons that you don't need me to get into. But what you may not know, and what I hope that you can understand, is the emotional impact of living with so much shame and uncertainty, and then receiving something that is yours and that is new and that is sized and picked just for you. For me, having a new pair of shoes and an outfit meant that I was seen. It meant that I was worthy. It meant I had choice when choice was such a rare commodity in my life. It meant that I could walk and jump and move without pain. It meant that I had dignity. Now, I will give you another reason to be here, and it has to do with the concept of shame resilience theory. Now, don't fall asleep. This is interesting. Shame resilience theory is, as the name suggests, a theory concerned with how people respond to feelings of shame. It was first articulated in a 2006 paper by Brené Brown. When people feel shame, according to Brown, they feel trapped, they feel powerless, and they feel isolated. Overcoming shame entails understanding why you feel shame, having others recognize and validate your feelings of shame, and having the reasons that you are ashamed actually addressed. One of the triggers of shame for many homeless children is that feeling that others can tell that they are homeless and are judging them for it. Unfortunately, those children are right. Now, Souls for Souls is going to ask you to help them give away 1.5 million pairs of shoes for 1.5 million homeless children. You need to know that those homeless children need all the resilience they can get to feel that it's worth it to keep going, to keep fighting, to keep trying to be successful so that they can break the cycle of poverty. They need to have all the resilience they can get at a time when school is no longer a sanctuary, where their mom might lose their job, where their family might lose their apartment, where the very air poses a danger to them. If you had the opportunity to provide dignity, security, and stability to 1.5 million children, would you seize that opportunity? Could you live with yourself if you didn't do everything in your power to ensure that a child could walk without pain from ill-fitting shoes? Take it from me, a child who experienced wearing good shoes and bad shoes, and take it from your own experiences that each of you have had when you wore something that you knew that you looked as well as felt good in. Give the gift of dignity, give the gift of choice, give the gift of comfort, of freedom from shame, of safety. All it takes, seriously, all it takes is a good pair of shoes. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to me. Thank you for taking the time to help homeless children today. And I am now going to pass it off to our wonderful host, Jamia.
Thank you so much, Khadijah, and thank you so much for sharing your inspiring story and for all the work you do to amplify your voice for change and to lift up other people's voices as well. I feel your power across the interwebs. My name is Jamia Wilson. I am so honored to be a part of this conversation today with Khadijah and our distinguished panelists to talk about the homelessness epidemic in the US and its intersections with COVID-19, race in America, and also how children uniquely experience homelessness. We're going to talk about how firsthand nonprofits and brands can pivot during times of crisis like the one we're in to meet the needs of their customers and their constituents. And we're going to talk about how to implement corporate and nonprofit partnerships in your own industry so each of us can take something away from this conversation to implement today, tomorrow, and into the future to make change in the lives of many. And I'm really excited to jump in and introduce our panelists. We have Deidre C. Thomas Murray, who is with Students in Transition, and she's the coordinator and foster care liaison for the St. Louis public school system. And we also have Sandra Park, who is a senior attorney, also the ACLU Women's Rights Project team member and attorney there. And we also share in common that she is a movement maker with Move to End Violence. And we also have Dick Johnson, who is the president and CEO of Foot Locker, Inc. As well. And we also have with us Buddy Teester, who is the president and CEO of Souls for Souls, who has brought us together today. So thank you so much for having me, and I'm excited to jump right in with our Q&A. So the first question that I have is for Sandra. And that question is, what makes the current homelessness crisis different from previous years? What is it about this moment that is so insurgent, that is so urgent?
Well, thank you, and it's a pleasure to be here with you all. You know, it's the sheer scale of the crisis that we're facing. Today, September 1, rent is due for millions of people today, and millions of those people are in distress. They're choosing between rent, food, shoes, clothing, other necessities, and they are falling behind. What researchers have found and are estimating is that 30 to 40 million tenants will face eviction by the end of this year. And so if we think about just the sheer scale of that, think about our neighborhoods and our communities where families are being evicted routinely, that just is a massive change in the way our communities can function. We're also facing this within a public health crisis. So one thing we've recognized in recent years is that eviction is not just a result of poverty, but it is also a cause of poverty. And in the age of COVID, it also presents acute public health risks. We've all been staying at home in order to minimize the spread. Eviction and homelessness will only exacerbate those risks. We're seeing more people living in the streets, crowding in shelters, and doubling up with family members and friends. And all of that is simply heightening the risk of COVID that we're facing now. The other thing that I want to emphasize for folks is we are also dealing with an economic crisis, long-term job loss for many people. There's uncertainty with childcare and schools and severe budget crises in our cities. And so it's more important than ever that we come together to really think about what resources, what strategies, what plans we need to put in place to stop the crisis of mass eviction and homelessness.
Thank you so much for speaking to this. I can say personally in the apartment I'm in New York City, I've seen several eviction notices in my own building and in my community. And I just want to say thank you for the work that you do, because I see this happening to my neighbors and the most vulnerable people who've lived in this community for many years before I was even born. And just want to thank you for the work that you're doing. So how has the eviction moratorium affected families? Are there any demographics of families that are particularly at risk?
Yes, well, we know eviction has a domino effect on families. So it can lead to job loss if you are already employed. It can lead to health issues. And it also has very long-lasting impacts in those arenas, as well as in your housing opportunity. Once you've faced eviction, even if you're able to defeat that eviction case, the mere fact that you have that eviction on your record is often used against families to prevent them from renting in the future. And so that really traps folks in terrible housing situations. And what we know from the research is that the most likely people to get evicted are women with their children. And there is certainly a racial dynamic there too, where the research has shown that it's more likely to be women of color with children. I think, it can be surprising to folks to think about the fact that one of the most vulnerable folks to eviction are children, and that families with kids are actually more likely to face eviction than other types of households. That having kids in the research is actually a risk factor for eviction. And researchers have found that families with kids are more likely to be evicted than other families. Part of that is a result of longstanding housing discrimination against families with children. But there are legal protections against that, but we still have a long way to go to address it. And in our work, we've really focused on this intersection of race, gender, and having children as a problem with respect to eviction. We did some research earlier in the year looking at eviction data from across the country, and we found that Black women renters had evictions filed against them at twice the rate of white renters in the majority of states we looked at. And the other thing that was very troubling to us is we found that Black women renters are more likely to have an eviction filed against them that is ultimately dismissed in court. So they are more likely to have that, what is called the Scarlet E, the Scarlet Eviction mark, put on them, even if they are able to defeat that case, that will then prevent them from new housing opportunities in the future. So, I think all of this reflects what we already know about social inequality in our country, but it's particularly troubling in the time of COVID, in the time of this housing crisis, that these issues are falling on women of color and women of color with children the hardest.
Thank you so much, Sandra. And Deidre, this folds into your work, and I was wondering if you could tell us about how does homelessness affect kids specifically as one of those vulnerable and at-risk demographics?
Well, it's kind of hard to explain. I think during this pandemic, a lot of adults got the experience of anxiousness, fear, food insecurity, possible evictions. And so that was the norm for homeless students. And now they get to either not see or see their teachers and those who they looked up to in the same lines with them, seeking food and assistance with utilities. You know, and share the story. I survived Hurricane Katrina, and I being in line with parents that looked up to me and looked to me for help and support during the Katrina story. And I had to remind them, you know, it's okay to stand next to me, but I'm seeking the same services you are. And so I think one of the challenges with children not being in school is whatever those struggles are, we don't get to see them or identify them up close and personal as we would if they were in a school. And so that's a challenge. You know, child abuse is a challenge. Domestic violence is a challenge. And so children are often the unattended victims in crises like this, because adults are busy about trying to make it make sense financially and trying to stay afloat and survive. And I remember one of my daughters said, I watch you through all of this. And who thinks about a kid watching them? And she said, you know, you were always upbeat. And so I think about the children who are experiencing homelessness, food insecurities, and I'm not suggesting that there are no programs in place. The unfortunate thing is a lot of times when these families find out the services are in place, you know, the people who want help gets the assistance in many instances rather than the people who need. And what I mean by that is, I was enrolled in school this semester. Well, I've been enrolled in school several semesters, but this email went out and talking about the CARES Act and those dollars that were available. And it was a first come, first serve. And as an advocate and having children call me who were in college to call me during this pandemic and say, Miss Deidre, I need you to find me housing immediately. And this kid was in Tennessee. And I said, well, check with the school about the CARES Act dollars. And to my point, they don't know the dollars exist on. And so, so I'm not just looking at challenges from the elementary and secondary school perspective, but also with higher education homelessness, because I purposefully monitor my students who graduate from high school and go on to college. They're unaccompanied youth in high school, but most folk don't know the legal definition is the law references those children as runaways and throwaways. Well, just imagine going off and you have no adult connection or no natural supports. And so I purposefully keep up with them, because if we're gonna make a difference, we have to make a difference. if that makes any sense. Did I answer your question?
Yes, and that makes complete sense. And one of the people who's making a difference and the organizations that are making the difference is Dick Johnson. And Dick Johnson, I would love to hear you talk about how you're a part of the solution. How does For Every Kid resonate with Foot Locker's mission?
Well, thanks, Jamia. It's really an honor to be part of the panel here today talking about this critical topic. And as the introductory materials that Partner for Impact put out talked about, we're disagreeing about a lot of things in America right now. But one thing that we really all need to agree on, that no child should be without a home. Right? And I think we can all work together to solve some of those problems. But Foot Locker exists to empower and inspire youth culture, right? And that's our mission. And how more powerful can it be than to help a homeless child, that can feel better on their first day of school? And we're firm believers, right? And Khadijah talked about ugly shoes and not feeling confident because she didn't have great shoes and sore feet, etc. But we absolutely believe that sneakers can help you feel better every single day. And I know that Buddy and the team does a great job at Soles for Souls distributing shoes. And we're going to contribute to about $1.5 million worth of shoes, 19,000 pairs of shoes to the effort. And we really believe that sneakers can make a difference. In this first day of school, it's going to be different for these kids than it's ever been before. There's going to be more pressure. Is it virtual? Is it physical? Is it a hybrid? Kids are going to be under more pressure, and the homeless kids even more so because of some of the situations that Khadijah talked about. Excuse me. And we have to make sure that we do what we can to help the children feel confident, to feel their best, to feel like they belong in the environment. In the U.S. here, our donation is being channeled through Soles for Souls and the For Every Kid program, which is truly going to benefit the public school students facing homelessness. This is going to be a different year than before, and we have to help them feel confident, making their first day of school a little bit easier. So again, around our mission to inspire and empower youth culture, it doesn't get better than putting a smile on a kid's face when they open up a box, when they put on a fresh pair of sneakers, when they walk proudly and confidently into that first day of school, knowing that they feel like they belong, regardless of the situation that they came out of. So that's what's important to us. I know it's what's important to Buddy and the team at Soles for Souls as well.
Thank you so much for all you do. I'm just thinking about what Khadijah said in the context of that and the image you gave around what it's like for the kids to put their shoes on, and hearing her say dignity and security, and thinking of all the footsteps that are being made to the first day of school today with dignity and security because of this program. So thank you so much. And now on to Buddy. I want to hear from the nonprofit side. How do you go about building corporate partnerships and linking together in initiatives like this?
Well, it's, I think Khadijah framed it really well. I mean, we have this, I got a text from a friend while we're talking, like, you should stop looking so serious during this conversation. But you listen to what Khadijah says, and how can you not be serious? I mean, it's 1.5 million kids. Thanks to Foot Locker, we're about to start with 15,000 pairs of shoes. This week, they start to get on kids' feet. That's something to smile about. And at the same time, I think one of the things that Soles for Souls tries to figure out is how to be a good business partner, right? It's easy to go and ask and say, you should give, and you should, and you should. And I don't know about that, but if we can be a good business partner, then there's a reason for everybody to do that. And to Dick's point, there are lots of ways that people aren't coming together right now. But I think, I feel for American business in a serious way. Capitalism is sort of under attack. There are a lot of people who don't think it's the way forward. And at the same time, through Soles for Souls work, we see all around the world that using a business approach to helping people out of poverty is the most sustainable way to do that. And so without Dick running a great business with an amazing team all around the world, these 15,000 pairs of shoes worth $1.5 million don't get to kids, right? So by being a good business partner and recognizing that a lot of companies, including Foot Locker, want to do the right thing, we can help them do that, right? They have lots of other things to do, and we can be a good channel for their customers and their employees to make a real difference in their community. So we look for those places where what we're good at doing is a good business match for an organization. And we try to think about hopefully it's good for the environment, hopefully it's good for their employees, and it's good for their customers. And you put all that together, and then hopefully, the Khadijahs who are there right now, who aren't seen, who don't have dignity, who are afraid of being beaten up, like that's going to change because of what Foot Locker does. And as we get better at this and tell the story more and understand how to better accomplish the mission, we got to collect a lot more shoes to get them on people's feet. But this, I think, is a great example of how that can happen. Look, how easy would it be for Foot Locker to say, retail's falling apart, this is not the time to do what we're doing, and yet they did the exact opposite. They leaned into it as hard as they could to say, now is the best time to show how business can help make a difference. So we really believe that and think that by taking that sort of partnership opportunity and attitude, there's a lot of great stuff that can still be unlocked.
Thank you so much. And I think that's such a valuable message just in general for what all of us can do in this moment around what is it we can lean into, even though the instinct might be to pull back. It's very powerful. And it leads me back to Deidre to ask you about what are the new challenges that the pandemic has presented for the kids you work with, especially knowing that they're returning to school right now? Are there things that would be important to highlight for all of us to have in mind as we're working to be part of the solution?
I think a part of the new challenges is school districts getting out the information to families with unique challenges, letting them know that although the district is 100% virtual, services and support still exist. And so ordinarily during this time of the year, I would conduct a back to school fair. And so the donations would be given away at the school fair. And, the new norm, the abnorm is our new norm. And I think just letting families know that services still exist, whether they can physically come into the building or not. School support staff are available. I get calls from parents who have family members dying during COVID. And back to my point of the natural supports, that's not a norm when you have a unique population. And so it's an opportunity for us to step up, for us to help out, for us to volunteer. And I just want to say thank you to Foot Locker, to Souls for Souls, because it's those programs that makes a difference. And in some instances, it's those items that causes parents to show up and come out to get the support that they need. There's nothing like Happy Feet, and at the start of the school year, that's a challenge for parents always, just having clothing and shoes. So I don't think there's any new challenges per se. I just think that the playing field is level. We're all getting to look through the lens of homeless populations, because now we're under threat or at risk because jobs have folded, agencies, businesses have closed down. And so it's not just the children, we have to be concerned about the parents managing the children in these unique times, because it's unprecedented. They've never experienced this. And a lot like Khadijah, until you experience it, you're clueless about the anxiousness, the anxiety, the preoccupation, having to choose medication over paying your rent. And so there are things that are happening during this pandemic that has been familiar to unique populations like New Orleans, like Florida, like Texas. But now we're all looking through that lens. And so I just say step up, don't be silent, and make yourself available if you see the need exists. So I say thank you to the group. Y'all have put together quite a set of partners, definitely for impact.
Thank you so much, Deidre. And Dick, in terms of impactful partners, I'm thinking about you and the wonderful work that you're doing, and wondered if you could shed some light on how companies can integrate purposeful partnerships into their business models in authentic ways, and also how you might have pivoted your approach during COVID, or did you lean into the approach? I want to know a little bit about that as well.
Well, certainly COVID-19 has impacted the most vulnerable communities around the globe, right? You know, and Khadijah shared some stories that, you know, certainly tracing her history, but the accelerant that COVID-19 has really impacted these vulnerable communities. You know, so when we are out looking for partners, and I appreciate Buddy's kind words, but you know, we really do look for people that are positioned to help us with our mission, our vision, and our purpose. You know, we have to share the same values. We have to want to do, you know, good things. And frankly, you know, we looked at Souls for Souls, and you know, we've been part of giveaways for years, right? We've worked with the Fred Jordan mission out in Los Angeles for 30 years, giving shoes and backpacks to kids for the first day of school. So this is not new to us. But when we came into the conversation with Buddy and the team at Souls for Souls, they're the perfect choice for us, right? They're doing good work. They work incredibly hard at creating unique partnerships around the world. And we're a global company, so 15,000 of the 19,000 pairs will be distributed here in the US. The other 4,000, you know, through Buddy's great work around the globe, we're going to go to different countries, different places where we also do business. But it really has, COVID-19 has supercharged the need for us to find purposeful partnerships. And, you know, we're going to take it a step further beyond the donation of the shoes to Buddy and the team. We've actually started a product initiative that we refer to as Collaborate, where we're going to partner with and collaborate with communities and companies to create some really unique product offerings. You know, we're working with an incredible collection of designers and brands, including Chinatown Market, Puma, Crocs, Converse, Vans, just to name a few, to create some really cool product. And to celebrate the launch of Collaborate, we're donating $250,000 to Souls for Souls to help facilitate the distribution of the footwear donation that we're making, right? It's one thing to get the shoes to Buddy and his team, but it costs money to get those shoes into the hands of the kids, the ultimate people that we want to impact. So, you know, Collaborate is more that we'll talk about publicly, but we are really excited to be able to find people that have the same beliefs that we have, that share the values, and that are committed to doing not good things, but are committed to doing great things. And that's certainly Buddy and the team at Souls for Souls.
Thank you so much. And speaking of impact, Buddy, why do you choose to focus on youth specifically experiencing homelessness for Souls' most recent initiative?
So first, I want to publicly thank Dick and the Foot Locker team. I knew about that number. That's not a surprise. And still, when he says it out loud, it's crazy, humbling, and exciting. So thanks for that confidence. And as I said to you before, we'll be good stewards and promise to have as much impact as we can. I have to say, like, we weren't super aware of it, Jimmy. It wasn't like, hey, we know about this problem and this is a long-term. But in the last year, we worked with a woman here in Nashville, which is where we're based, who was involved with the Second Harvest Food Bank here in Middle Tennessee for a long time. And as we were talking to Janie, who's really smart, she said, hey, there's this piece that nobody's talking about when it comes to homelessness. There are people worried about housing and food, and those are the most important things. That's how the problem is long-term going to be solved. But nobody's really focused on shoes. And you heard Khadijah talk about how important that is physically, but especially emotionally. And so as Janie sort of opened our eyes to that, we're like, yeah, if somebody's going to help solve this, it seems like Souls for Souls should have a role in that. And over the last few months, as we've dug into it and talked to people like Deidre and others who are serving that population in our public school system, we know who these kids are for the most part. The schools are probably the best way to distribute the shoes and make sure they get to the right people in a respectful way that doesn't identify the kids or call them out for some additional kind of targeting. And the problem was honestly way bigger than we even thought. I mean, when Janie said, hey, you should go look at these numbers, it's 4,000 kids in the public school system in Nashville. Like, we were shocked. We live here, we have no idea. And then we peel that back a little bit more, and as Khadijah said, it's 1.5 million. And to Sandra's point, that number, there's no way it doesn't increase dramatically in the months ahead. So as we've gotten a better understanding of the problem, you know, the scale sort of daunts us. We have to figure out how to go from where we are to 1.5 million pairs of shoes. But there is every reason to, in addition to all the work that we do around the world, to really find something important to work on here in the US, and this seems like it.
Thank you. And it's super important. And I'm really happy that we're having this conversation today, because I know it's inspired me to want to get involved. And I was not aware before. So I love that we're having this community opportunity together to be brought together to have the conversation about awareness and what we can do to take action. So now we have some really great audience questions that we're going to ask. And what I'm going to do is kind of bring the questions to the panel, and any speaker can respond to the questions. We have about 10 minutes to answer them, so we want to keep our responses as concise but impactful as possible. And the first question is about, what do we know about the impact of mental health on perseverance, especially in the context of homelessness? And how does that play into this initiative right now?
Well, I think I kind of spoke a little bit about the children's norm. You know, they've lived through anxiousness, fear, anxiety, and now we have the professionals who it's their first time going through something that has been a lifestyle for children. And so I know in our district, we serve over 5,000 homeless children and families. And I think I said, I don't know if I was talking to Alexandra or Jamia, but we create a culture of family with our families at St. Louis Public Schools. And so if our families are going through challenges, they're comfortable enough to call. What I is there are staff that are suffering. And the unfortunate thing is mental health has always been a taboo. I've always said, if you don't treat it, you're bound to repeat it. So it doesn't go away. In our district, we've made some crisis response teams available. We make referrals. So don't think the mental health issues do not exist. They do. Fear, whether it's rational or irrational, it exists, and you see it if you're paying attention. Parents, professionals probably don't want schools open more than children. And so as much as I have concerns about the pandemic, one thing for certain, two things for sure, children are going to get 3 meals a day, and they might make a mistake and learn. And so that's the benefits of being in school. I don't know if that answered your question, but we do make referrals and have a team of social workers available for our staff and our students.
Thank you so much. And thanks for such a thoughtful answer to this question as well. I also wanted to ask another question, which we have here, which are, what are some definitive ways that a novice can provide effective support for those facing homelessness, particularly in our community?
I don't know if I'm supposed to answer.
You can. If you feel called to answer, you're supposed to answer.
Buddy, if you have the answer, you go ahead. I'll make mine short and you jump in, but I think one of the keys is knowing the signs and the causes of homelessness and being educated about the definition of homelessness, because the state or the city definition looks a lot different than the federal definition of homelessness. And so for school-aged children, the law defines homelessness as children who lack fixed, regular, and adequate nighttime residence. I'm not going to go into the definition because I'm going to allow Buddy to speak.
No, actually, I want to, Sandra probably has some very tangible things to do, because this is, I think one of the things that's important, I've learned a lot personally, this is not an individual responsibility or choice all the time. There's a lot of structural, systemic policy decisions that have gotten us to where we are. Sandra and ACLU are masters at that. But I will say, and it was a question also in Q&A, like, I think one important thing, Khadijah said it, is to see people, to see this problem, not look away. And so one of the things that we can all do as novices or just every day going through our lives, you know, the question from Willie was about artists, like, look at it, you know, look at it in your daily life, read about it, look at there are incredible photographic essays. Willie Baronet, who's a good friend, does a project called We Are All Homeless that is heartbreaking and optimistic and accurate. So I think something that we should all do, like an obligation, is to understand this in a personal way. And there are things that we should be doing around policy. There are things that we should be understanding that, you know, we can take individual action, in lots of different ways at our local community. But I think it starts with being honest and looking at the problem and not trying to stay at a superficial level. But I know Sandra has probably some specific things that people can take action on.
Sure, yeah, and I absolutely agree. I think just being open to seeing what people are going through around us. Jamia mentioned having neighbors. I think many of us have neighbors or other family members who are going through this. And so just recognizing the issues and extending on just a personal level support when that's possible. On a policy level, you know, given the scale of the issue, we are doing a lot of advocacy at local, state, and the federal level. And the two big asks that the ACLU and other partners have been pushing forward are one, around stopping evictions right now and putting in place moratoria. There have been moratoria in states as well at the federal level, but most of those have now ended. And so we are really urging states and the federal government to put in place another moratorium so that people are not facing the loss of their homes right now, particularly during the pandemic. And then the second piece that is so important is around rent relief. You know, for many of the tenants who are facing eviction, their back rent is just piled up. And even if they are lucky to be in a state where evictions are not moving forward right now, it's going to be an insurmountable hurdle for them. And then there are also landlords who, many of whom may be counting on that income. And so we do think, just given the scale of the issues that we're facing, we need to be pushing the government to fund rent relief that will provide some measure of, you know, remedies for both tenants and landlords right now. Congress is coming back next week, and so the ACLU actually has an action right now to help people reach out, particularly to their senators on this. So there's more information available on our website about how to do that.
Thank you so much. And I'm really glad that you brought that up, because I think too, one thing that I got educated about it, so I just want to share, is looking at other models in other countries who are doing that. Because sometimes if we haven't seen an example, we don't think it's possible, but want to inspire people who might be trying to explain to people about why this is something we should be looking into, that there are models that we could be looking at. And that's exciting to think about how those can inform what we do. So we have a question here from one of our guests today, saying that Buddy talked about being a good business partner. How does Souls for Souls tangibilize this? What do you do to be a good business partner?
So I think one of the first things is to say to the business, it is okay to have a business outcome for doing this work. Like, I think lots of times we come in saying, how are we a good business partner? And the business is saying, how are we a good charitable partner? And it's okay to say, it is all right to share these stories, like to want more customers, to want them to be more engaged. Like, there are, to use the word tangible business benefits that should come back to the organization, whether that's around storytelling or employee engagement or loyalty programs for your customers if they take certain actions. All those things for us are like, we love having targets and ways to be able to communicate back, hey, this is going to help your business. This is what you said. Here, how can we help do that? I think the other thing that's, maybe a little squishier, but just as important, is to take seriously the commercial aspects. So if a company donates shoes to us, for example, and they say, hey, we only want these to go to certain places, is to make sure that happens. That doesn't sound very important, but if you're like Dick, or you're one of the brands that he works with, they spend billions of dollars making that brand work. And to have it show up online or someplace that it shouldn't, where it damages their brand, that's a real cost. And so we take that seriously, that the more that we can do to help these companies be successful, the more they have available to help those in need. And so we think that's a virtuous circle. And so we take from the pretty operational, like, where does the stuff show up, all the way to what are your goals around how you position your brand. And as long as we're cognizant of that, we think we have an approach that everybody can win.
I'd just jump in and add to that I find Souls for Souls just to be incredibly authentic, right? We want to do good in the communities where we live and work. And by our partnering with Buddy and the team at Souls for Souls, we know that the footwear that we give, the sneakers that we give, the money that we give are going to be put to use in those communities to better the lives, in this case, of kids, which, again, there's an authenticity that just has to be there, right? And I think it is a virtuous circle, right? We expect to get some business benefit out of this, quite honestly, right? If it helps homeless kids in the neighborhoods where we live and work, then that's a plus, right? And again, I think going back to Khadijah's talk about how shoes are empowering and they give you confidence. Sure, we want those kids to be our customers eventually, but we want them to feel great about life today, even if they're not coming from what is a great experience without the permanent housing and roof over their head, as Deidre talked about. So, and I think it's that virtuous circle that Buddy referred to. And I also think there's an authenticity that has to be there in order to really make it work for both sides of the equation.
Thank you so much. And now I have our last question, and I think Buddy's the one to answer this, but we'll see if others might have something to say that will then take us out of the panel and into some closing inspiring words from Nancy Youssef, which is, how do we help distribute the 1.5 million pairs of shoes to homeless children? So I remember both of you have mentioned that, and that it would take a lot of resources and time, and there's all sorts of supply chain things, I'm sure, that you have to think about. I'm in publishing, so I'm experiencing that in my own life right now, and just wondering if, I'm asking you the impossible, if you could give us a brief answer to explain how is it that we can help you distribute those 1.5 million shoes, and if there's something that we can all do today to help take on some of that and carry the weight of that to help get these shoes on the feet that need them.
Well, I'll start. I certainly don't have anything like the whole answer, but the first problem we have to solve is getting the shoes, right? I mean, the distribution part is relatively straightforward. Almost every school system has someone identified to work with the homeless school kid population. So again, because of that infrastructure, it's pretty clear, like, we need to get them to this person, and they will get them to the kids who need them. The trick will be the 1.5 million. That's a lot of shoes. I mean, that's a serious commitment of shoes, of branded athletic shoes in the US, right? That's a very high bar. And so, and we promise there's no ask on this call, and there's not, but it's going to mean a change in the Souls for Souls model, which right now has relied exclusively on donated shoes. we may have to do something different. We may have to buy shoes, manufacture shoes, because if we're going to make that commitment and honor it, we can't just depend on like, well, someone donates 50,000 pairs of women's high heels does not solve the homeless school kid issue, right? So this is a tricky problem. Supply chain's a part of it. Brand is a part of it. COVID-19 only complicates things because of all the supply chain issues, and especially throughout Asia. So our focus is going to be on how do we source the 1.5 million pairs of shoes. And that's going to be the generosity of companies like Foot Locker. It's going to be probably a different economic model, which might rely more on philanthropy. And so if you want to help on this, it will really be to help us figure out how to find those shoes. So as an individual, that might mean writing a check. As a company, it might mean something else. And that is going to be our challenge in the year ahead for sure.
Thank you so much. And we are all here to help you with that challenge. And I hope each of us will also make a pledge to spread the word about what we heard today so we can bring in other people to help with that challenge as well. And now I am pleased to thank the panel and also to pass it on to Nancy Youssef, who will close us out. Thank you so much.
Hey, everybody. Thank you. Before we end, I want to extend huge gratitude and thanks to every single one of our speakers, our amazing moderator, and to everyone that attended today. You know, today's speakers shared not only their personal stories and insights, but even call to action on how we can help to respond to this crisis. You know, Khadijah, so unbelievably, and I did tear up, to be honest, walked us through her journey as a child and through the lens of her view on movement and education. She called it her space and her sanctuary. Can you imagine what a pair of shoes, what a difference those can make? She taught us about shameless resistance theory. That was the first time I'd heard that. And Sandra, you know, eloquently talked about the scarlet E, right? Which plays right into that shame and that dignity that people have. Deidre so eloquently highlighted that this is not someone else's problem. This is our problem. This is our community. It's in our own backyard. And children are the unintended victims in this crisis. And Dick and Buddy, I mean, what a great conversation, and how powerful to create purposeful partnerships and bringing together these two seemingly different worlds of corporate and nonprofit. It's such an incredible and powerful opportunity for us to all use our tools and our voices to help support and lift every single one of these folks out of this. We're so thankful for you all to be here. We didn't get around to every single question, so there'll be an event recap where the Souls for Souls team will answer the questions. And part of that recap will also be specific takeaways from discussions that we had today and how you can apply that to your own work wherever that may be. We hope to see you all next quarter. We're going to do this quarterly now. I'm super excited about it. Our Partner for Impact event for next time will be December 3rd and about sustainability. Again, so much gratitude to all of you, and thank you for tuning in this morning.